Welcome to another episode of the Clever Dev, and what we're going to look at is something very basic but necessary. We're going to look at the autocomplete and how to get default values and setters and getters for the values. Same thing with TextField. So if this is something you need help with, then stick around. We'll start with the autocomplete and get that functional, and then we'll move on to the text field. So the autocomplete, you can see I've got quite a bit of code already in place. It's really just to set the stage. We have a functioning autocomplete at this point. And so I have a few values down here for my data. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add that default value prop, and then we will also get an onChange handler in here that will, and an onSubmit. And so just a little bit of functionality. So first, let's add this default value. And what we want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and directly access the first value in that data prop. Now, if you, in a moment, will add a state value, and if I tried to pass the state value in here, then it doesn't like it if the state value updates. It says, hey, you're trying to update the default value. What are you doing? So it's best to just pass a single value that's never going to change. So we've got that in place now. The next thing that we need to do is we need to actually create our state value. So I will say const AC value and set AC value. And we will say that uses useState. And I've got some TypeScript already in place. I have an interface called shipData, and so I'm going to put that in here, and just going to give it the ability to be either shipData or null type. And I'll say I'm going to put in data 0 right here. So what I'm doing here, if I can get all these parentheses out of the way, is I'm accessing that data array with my default values, and I'm saying state can start out with a value from that data array. So now that VS Code is happy, compiler is happy, we can see that everything seems to be working fine. So let's go over to our app here. We can see already that this default value is in place. Haven't done anything with the state yet though. So what we need next then is our onChange. So I have a setter also. The setter is really just a part of the state value here. So I was looking for it, and then of course it's just right there. So we'll say onChange. We need to update that state value. So let's say onChange, we're going to give that curly braces, and let's just have it right in here. I'm not going to create a separate handler for my onChange. I'll just go ahead and pass in an arrow function right here. And instead of even doing that, I'll just directly call set AC value, and I will pass in value. So the autocomplete, it passes in both the event and the new value by default to its change handler. So we don't need the event, but we do need that value. And so now whenever autocomplete changes, then this state value, AC value, is getting updated. And there's nothing really to see yet with that in the UI. But the next thing that we can do is we can add a submit to our form. And so let's do that. Let's say, just right here, we'll say on submit. And we will pass in an event. And let's see, that's all we need there. So let's go ahead and add our call to our handle submit. And I showed that to you just up above here. And I'll say event and AC value. So pretty cool, we can just nab that AC value right away. And then you can see our handle submit up here. We have the event, we have state value, and so I'm just going to log both. And that's our submission here. So that's really all there is for default value, which I showed here, and for being able to set values or get values from our autocomplete. So really that's the getting of the values from the autocomplete. If we wanted to do some kind of set value, then what we could do is we could say value equals AC value. And this is actually a roundabout way of getting a default value in there, because right here I've set my AC value to the initial value from data, and so that's going to initialize our app, and I'm just going to refresh this. One thing to look at is our console, see if there's any errors over there, but we're looking good so far. And we're able to change values without errors, so that's good. And I'll do my submit, and we can see that we're printing out that both the event and the value. And the value is an object, so this, while it looks a little bit worrisome, it's actually the right value over here. Now let's move on to the text field. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button in a minute that will be able to update the text field, but first we need to get some values on the text field, and we need our state value. So the text field also has a default value. It's a lot like the MUI component, and it's a lot like the autocomplete. In fact, autocomplete often uses a text field for its input portion, or the area where chosen values are rendered. So we could say, ABC as our default value here, and it accepts that. That's a valid prop. But I'm going to move on to the meat of our example here of this demo, and I'm just going to go ahead and add in a const, and I will call it TF value for text field value, and then I'll say set TF value, and I will say use state, and I'll just say that the starting value is the string original value. So let's just make sure everything's looking good with that. So as expected, we're not seeing anything yet because we haven't plugged in this TF value, but we can go ahead and do that. And so I will say value equals, and I will say equals TF value. And so now let's see what happens. I'm going to refresh that. That was interesting. I saw the label move there. It took it a moment, but anyway, so refreshed. It's already got original value in there without me doing anything. So kind of like with the autocomplete, that is a backdoor way to have a default value if you're using state. So next thing that we need is our onChange, and I'm going to say, we'll say new value. So anytime that our text field changes, we're getting a new value in there. And I will say set TF value, and let's say new value dot target dot value. And what's going on here is that this is actually an event. Really, I should probably call that event dot target dot value. That's a better way of saying it, to show that it's an event. If I call it new value, then it kind of implies that I'm getting the actual exact string value, but no, I have to dig into it a little ways. So now I think we're looking pretty good on our text field, on its functionality, but what we need to do is to demo this all properly, that it's all both getting and setting values. Let's add a button, and I'll say variant equals outlined, and I'll say on click equals, and not really going to do a whole lot in here, except we'll say set TF value, and I will just take the existing TF value, and I will say +1. And it's not a +1 like a numeric one, it's +1, a string one. And the purpose of this is just to show that we are in fact updating the TF value, which I'll put here as the output or the text on our button. So now let's see how everything looks. And it looks like our compiler is happy, so let's go over here. And I can type in there, and it updates the text here. So we're definitely getting values from our text field, and our button was using that same state value for its output. If I click here, then I can see that I am in fact appending a string 1 value in that state value, which is then reflected in our text field and on this button. So it looks like everything's good. Like I said, not the most exciting content today, but it is important. There are links to the posts, the articles where you can get full code for these two examples. So definitely check out the video details.